So a federal bill has been introduced which requires a federal license for you to own and possess handguns and also creates registration for handguns as well. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that you do not need a federal license to exercise your core Second Amendment rights, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I also want to give a shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, and that is USCCA. Through your membership, you get training, education, and self-defense liability protection. So if you carry a firearm, I highly recommend you look into USCCA, and I'll put a link to them down in the details section. So like I said in the intro, there is a federal bill that has been proposed, which is HR 3740, which seeks to actually make it a requirement for you to have a federal license to own and possess a handgun in the US, and also creates this registration process for handguns as well. This is going to be HR 3740, and HR 3740 is being titled the Handgun Licensing and Registration Act of 2021. It is introduced by Bonnie Watson Coleman out of New Jersey and is co-sponsored as well by Congressman Frank Pallone out of New Jersey, Albio Series out of New Jersey, and Adriano Espaillat out of New York. HR 3740 has 7 co-sponsors as of right now, and it's a fairly new proposed bill that has actually been introduced. But let's talk a little bit about what this does and kind of the major impacts that this would have on our Second Amendment rights. So what does it do? Well, it can be summed up real easy in one of the first pages of the proposed bill and its text, and I'll put a link to that down in the details section if you want to read it for yourself. This states that the Attorney General of the United States shall establish a federal system for licensing and registration of all handguns owned, possessed, or controlled in the United States. So again, a federal license for you to own and possess handguns and also create a registration process for them. And what are the requirements for you to actually get this federal license? Well, it's outlined in here as well. You must be at least 21 years old. You must undergo a firearm training kind of certification process. So again, an age requirement, a training requirement, and then also a background check requirement just for you to get that license. Then there's going to be fingerprinting, a photo for that license as well. And then there's going to be a license renewal process where this license will only be good for 5 years. It'll expire and you'll have to renew it. Along with all of that, which you guys are probably familiar with, like CCW processes and licenses for CCWs, there's going to be fees attached to this as well. So although this is going to be a federal program for a license for you to purchase a handgun or to own and possess a handgun, there's also going to be this requirement where you're going to have to pay fees attached for you to be able to even to get this license. So this bill is all geared around actually creating an extra barrier of entry for you to even exercise your Second Amendment rights in the US, because they're adding on another licensing scheme just outside of your CCW process or anything like that. This is just a license for you to own and possess handguns. It is a license for you to actually own something that is protected under the Second Amendment. Now, it's gonna be interesting how this might interplay with the other state issues. For example, like the state of California has the firearm safety certificate, where we already have this kind of state requirement for you to purchase a handgun or purchase a firearm. You're gonna have to have that firearm safety certificate, where you have to go through a kind of test and process and fees and all that attached with the firearm safety certificate. And this is kind of mentioned in this bill as well, where they say that there's going to be this federal program, but states can opt out of that federal program as long as they also have a state program equivalent to the federal program. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking at this point, well, some states will just simply not comply. One of the things with that is this is going to be a federal law. The states at least need to have an equivalent, but attached to that as well, there's a grant program in this bill that says that they will incentivize states to actually institute their own programs, and which means they're going to throw a ton of cash at these states to actually do this. And so states like the state of California might opt out of that general federal program, but they already have that firearm safety certificate put in place. And so they will have maybe some money just thrown at them because they already have a state equivalent program. But some other states might create a state equivalent program just to kind of get that federal cash flow coming in. Now, one of the things also to note with this is there is going to be a penalty attached to the individuals if they do not actually comply with this federal licensing scheme for you to own and possess handguns. And the penalties attached with that would be some sort of imprisonment, fees, or a combination of both is what this bill states. And so when you talk about the whole registration of handguns, where does that come from? Well, if you look at the text, what it states is that it shall be unlawful for a person to own, possess, or control a handgun in a state to which this subsection applies, unless the person A, is licensed to do so by the system established pursuant to paragraph 1, and has registered the handgun with a federal, state, or local law enforcement agency. So there is actually a registration requirement in this bill. So not only will you have to have this federal license or the state license or equivalent, but that handgun you're in possession of or you own will also have to be registered either with the state, the federal government, or some sort of local law enforcement agency that is a part of instituting this bill. Now let's look at some quotes from the author and co-sponsors of this bill and the whole rationale they're putting behind needing to have a federal license for you to actually exercise your core Second Amendment rights. What do they say is that rationale? Well, here are some quotes. This is coming from the actual author, Watson Coleman. She states, "The National Rifle Association has for years threatened, fundraised, and strong-armed the debate around the Second Amendment for so long that common sense measures that would bring down rates of gun violence and even receive the support of law enforcement have been deemed taboo. Today, after years of horrific incidents of gun violence, large majorities of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents are calling for action. Our government requires registration and basic standards for voting, operating a vehicle, even opening a business. Yet for weapons created with a single intent to take a life, we have developed a dangerous aversion to any mechanism to understand where and with whom the weapons reside. It is time to give law enforcement the tools to prevent this violence and provide a record of accountability for those who seek to do others harm." So it's actually interesting. In that quote, she pretty much states that she wants to treat your Second Amendment rights similar to having to get a license for you to drive or operate a vehicle. She draws that equivalent right there. She talks about operating a vehicle. And then at the end of her press release, she states that despite making up only 4% of the world's population, the United States accounts for nearly 40% of all guns, which again, we need to bump those numbers up a little bit. So what's the main takeaway from this bill? Again, it's a very short bill and very straightforward in what it's trying to do. It's trying to treat your Second Amendment right not as an actual right, but a privilege. It is trying to create a licensing scheme and a registration scheme around you exercising that right. Pretty much exactly what she said. They want to treat your Second Amendment right similar to you having to have a license to drive a vehicle or open a business. They do not want to treat this as a right at all. They want to strip you of that right and treat it as something lesser than a right. So we definitely need to get out and oppose this bill. Contact your local representatives. Let them know that you oppose HR 3740, that you oppose actually this handgun licensing scheme and this registration scheme, that you will not support your representative if they support this bill, and we need to shut this down before it gains any more traction. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff helps to fuel the algorithm. It signals to YouTube that you actually value these videos and it helps to push it more to other individuals who would appreciate this type of 2A news that otherwise they are just not getting. So please just like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. It really helps out the channel more than you would even know. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.